Hiya, guys! We're back with more bleed build stuff. There's been some new tech that's been found that makes it better. And we untangled some sims and stuff, so I just want to give a quick update on how that's all looking like. I have a list that I will be referencing. This is mostly sim changes that affect rotation and stuff, and a couple of findings that go with it. So, right off the bat, I'd like to thank Elim from the Ravenholt Discord. He's also the Icy Veins guide writer for Subtlety. Been a tremendous help with all of the sim stuff, as well as Lasona. Lasona is Ravenholt's kind of like weak aura add-on Lua code savant. She's been fantastic with helping with the weak aura that I'll show later. So, with all that out of the way, let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. So first of all, bleed build. If you haven't seen it, I yapped about this. I have a long video. This is just going to be kind of a mini update. First things first, follow the blood. Very good now. This has been a meme talent for a very long time. I mentioned this in the previous video, that the extra damage on Crimson Tempest snapshots for sudden demise, this is something that we actually kind of want now, because it sims equal to Momentum of Despair. So Crimson Tempest, huge amount of damage, and it just buffs your sudden demise, which can't be simmed. So even though they sim equal, obviously this is going to be more sudden demise damage, ergo more damage in total. So Follow the Blood, really good. Momentum of Despair is still completely viable if you prefer, the crit strike chance and whatever. There is kind of a gameplay feel associated to that, where you get more combo points. But I think in reality, Follow the Blood and trying to play around, big sudden demise hits is going to net you more damage in the long term. The next thing, cooling is back, baby. But hold your horses, not really. The only difference is previously in Mythic Plus with Sanguine Blades, you'd want to be under 50% energy to avoid Sanguine Blades triggering. Now with a bleed build, with Envenom doing no damage, or very little at least, you want to be above 50% here. This is a very minor thing overall, however. Super minor, you don't have to force yourself to be above 50. You drop below like that, it's perfectly fine. This also helps, get you into a cooldown window. You can start spamming away. So hovering around a higher percentage, being above 50%, totally reasonable now. You don't have to perfect it or anything, but it is much better to be above 50% than a hybrid build, for example. Hybrid build really wants to be under 50%. And so the difference between a hybrid build and a bleed build being above 50% and a hybrid build being below, is around 0.6 or 0.7%, that is. So in that situation, pretty big number. The next thing, in regards to Shiv, I've seen a couple questions about when to Shiv. So obviously you want to have your 2 charges of Shiv. If you press Deathmark, right, Shiv 1, and once this drops off, you're going to do your second Shiv. But the question is, what do you do after your Deathmark, right? So when your Deathmark expires and your Shiv comes back up, what can you do with it? We've tried a number of things, but in reality, it doesn't really make all that big of a difference, because the Envenoms aren't that important. You don't want to be holding them necessarily for Darkest Night procs or something. You can just kind of freely send them. And attached to that, there's also a good idea to hold at least 1 charge of Shiv outside of Deathmark for either Zoldyck range, right? Because your bleeds will be doing more, and so Shiv in Zoldyck range is more important. Or you can hold 1 charge on a boss fight for an upcoming pull for something AoE, because we want that arterial precision damage on pull. Those are kind of things that you're going to be interested in. The next thing I can't really show off too well, but I'm going to hit the dummies anyways. previously 5 Ruptures is kind of all you wanted with a hybrid build going into your Envenoms and your Caustic Spatter damage. But with a bleed build, obviously, again, Envenom, less damage. This is a reoccurring theme, is Envenom is doing less damage. So having a couple of Ruptures out past 5, completely fine. And there's actually a sort of thing where you can Rupture for sudden demise, and that in practice can be better. So, for example, a sudden demise Rupture. Fully sudden demise a Rupture on 2 targets. That is more damage than an Envenom with a Caustic Spatter onto the second target. Obviously, this only works in low target cleave situations. If you have like 5 targets, for example, the Caustic Spatter damage will outvalue the Rupture. But for something like being in a Indiscriminate Carnage window, where you're having 3 Ruptures spreading, the value of that Rupture is really high, right? Because you're getting 3 Ruptures for the same combo point. So, in those situations, don't be afraid to kind of get another Rupture or 2 out. You kind of want your Ruptures on all of the big targets. So if there's some stragglers, like let's say, what's a good example? Meadery, let's say. If you have a pole that looks like this, right? These tiny beelets, you don't need to focus on rupturing these because these will die instantly. So make sure you have your Ruptures out on the big targets, but the little targets, don't focus too much on them. Past that, right, Garrotes, you can keep using Garrote as a generator. So you can keep Garroting, make sure everything has Garrote. But for Ruptures, just make sure it's up on the main targets, and if there's some Ruptures on the smaller targets, that just helps your sudden demise damage, and that's just good overall. The next thing, Crimson Tempest. This is a weird one, and I'm going to walk over to these dummies to actually show you this, and this is where the weak aura from Lasona comes in. So, to explain this, Crimson Tempest deals additional damage when multiple enemies are afflicted, increasing by 20% per target up to 100%. Now, the important thing to note is when multiple targets are afflicted. So this is 0% bonus in single target and 40% on 2 targets. So it's a big shift. And we want to be maintaining Crimson Tempest in single target with a bleed build. That is something that was already known, and we already had that set up. The thing, though, is if you have an empowered Crimson Tempest, so here 2 targets hit with Crimson Tempest, and then let's say this dummy dies, you don't want to refresh this Crimson Tempest. You treat it like an improved Garrote, and you let it expire. And so you'll see here, this weak aura won't glow for Pandemic unless the second target is in range. So there's a range check on this that indicates, if there's 2 targets and the target dies, you're back in single target, goes down to 1, you don't want to refresh that. In normal AoE situations, like if it goes from 5 targets to 4 targets, let's say, you can still refresh that freely in Pandemic. That's totally fine, because having the bleed up in AoE is just way more important than trying to game it and let it drop. And Sims also tend to agree with that. This is specifically for the situation of, like, let's say, a boss with ads. So I'll use another example. For example, Bank, right? Bank is a great example for this. Bank spawns the bees that come out of the canisters, the little meadery canisters. So you can Crimson Tempest the bees and Bank, and it would be like a 4-target Crimson Tempest, so it'd be 80% stronger. When the bees die, you let the Crimson Tempest expire on Bank before refreshing, right? You don't want to be refreshing that 80% stronger Crimson Tempest in single target, and so that weak aura is going to help out with that. I'm gonna be linking the weak aura down below. It's also already in my weak aura pack, which you can also find down below. So if that's something you're interested in, you can go ahead and have a yoink for either the standalone version or my pack. Checking, moving on. Yeah, so last thing. Shiv in AoE. this is also a very minor thing, but let's say that you have 2 charges of Shiv, where you're at like 1.5 charges of Shiv, right? Like you used a Shiv on pull, you got your bleeds out, whatever, and now the mobs are starting to get to like 45, 50% health. What do you do? So in this situation, it's actually more valuable to hold on to your Shiv for a second, wait until the mobs get to 35%, and then use the Shiv for execute. It's the same concept as in single target where you're holding a Shiv, but in AoE it's also important because you have RT precision striking 7 additional nearby enemies. So, good stuff there. Execute damage, good. Zoldyck damage, good. Some other tech. This is more of like, I wouldn't call this like necessarily rotational changes, but just a yap discussion about some stuff that can happen. In very low keys, I'm talking like below 10s probably, it's actually semi-reasonable to drop these 3 or 4 talents, I guess. Let me get out of the way of Bone Spike. Hello, please. Far do I need to go? I'm in combat. Alright. Anyways, as I was saying, so you can drop T and Vigor and Leeching Poison and take Forced Induction. Now, you might have seen some rogues, they actually go the other way with this. They take these points out. And I highly, highly, highly disagree with that. Subterfuge is really strong, and Without a Trace is also quite strong, especially for chain pulls and stuff. Having an extra Vanish charge and being able to bank those is super important. Dropping Subterfuge and Without a Trace for Forced Induction is a gain in single target, but you lose such an insane amount of AoE that you just simply can't do it. So in low keys, I would recommend instead, if you really want to, you can drop T and Vigor. Sorry, you drop T and Vigor, take Forced Induction instead, and this would give you a 10 combo point. You know, you would Shiv an AoE, get a 10 combo point Crimson Tempest, maybe a 10 combo point Rupture. You'd have this huge bleed banked up, and so you can get, you know, really large execute damage going on. Especially, you know, Sudden Demise, if it pops, I mean, we're talking huge numbers. The other thing is Blindside and Improved Ambush. A lot of people are forgetting Improved Ambush is now better with Blindside, and this is part of the reason, these 2 talents are part of the reason why bleed builds are actually doing more in single target compared to a hybrid build. So Kingsbane itself, not really that strong, especially outside of Deathmark. Poison Bomb's okay, Amplifying Poison's obviously really good, but having the extra bleed damage below 35% health, having the extra Blindsides proccing under 35% health, then getting the additional combo points from Ambush actually makes Blindside and Improved Ambush just a great combo to have, especially on bosses. And getting the extra Sudden Demise, you know, for ads that are up. I already mentioned Bank Buzzbee, right? But this is something that happens across many things, right? You have the droplets from Ipa. You have in Priory, you have the little dudes that spawn in P2 here. You can Suddenize those. In Dark Flame Cleft, you have all these tiny mobs, these Skittering Darkness. You can Sudden Demise all of those. You can Sudden Demise the ads on the Darkness on the last boss. So all of these, you know, especially the first boss here, you have all of these tiny ads around first boss. Those are all Sudden Demisable. So playing for Sudden Demise, I think, is just very important. Even if it's not the biggest of like single target gains, where it's not like the most flattering thing, seeing those pops and having your Sudden Demise damage be really high. I don't actually have anything up here to show, but in like a 15 Mother Load, it was doing 9% of my damage. In a Floodgate, it was also around 9%. Other people have reported seeing Sudden Demise damage between like 7 to 9%. So sudden demise is something that's really, really, really impactful. And I would highly recommend just giving it a try on a lot of these tiny mobs. It really, the pop is really impressive. I actually have a clip that I can show that kind of would maybe show this a little better. So this is a clip from Aleem. I need to swap over my screen here. So this is a clip from Aleem in a 14 workshop. And you can see... Okay, well... You can see this MK3, right? The gauntlet that happens after the second boss, after Cujo. And you'll see with a death mark up, an improved Garrote, and a Rupture, and a Crimson Tempest on 3 targets, all of a sudden, this mob goes from about 22, 21, 14, dead. So, the ticks are just absolutely bleeding this out, and the sudden demise damage goes crazy. Just on this pull alone, you see him hovering his damage. On this pull alone, his sudden demise did 28% of his damage, and it did 64 million. I know that in the past, a lot of people have been arguing that sudden demise is bad, but when the numbers are this big, it actually does speed up the speed that you get to the next pull. It can help you re-stealth. You know, when there's mobs at like 2%, sudden demise can execute those off and help you get a re-stealth. So in general, I think it's just really, really, really... I think that covers all of the changes, all of the discussions that have been going around. The last thing I want to kind of remind people of is, how do I get Iron Wire? I've seen some people dropping like sudden demise to get Iron Wire, which is just insane. I've seen some people dropping arterial precision to get Iron Wire, also just insane. That's completely antithetical to the build. If you really must get Iron Wire, right, the thing to do would be to drop Lightweight Shiv. I think in practice, though, this quality of life of being able to bank Shiv charges is really important. And you'd lose a lot of Shiv charges not doing this. It's the same kind of argument as with Without a Trace, except that Vanish is a 2-minute cooldown, so you lose less casts overall. With a 30-second cooldown, having an additional charge is really impactful, especially when your Shiv is doing big damage with arterial precision. So, my personal recommendation, if you really want to get Iron Wire, would be to drop Bone Spike, and then you can either keep Doomblade or move it to Kingsbane. Now, this does make your openers feel a little worse because you don't get the instant refresh on combo points from Bone Spike. But, you know, some sacrifice has to be made. Master Assassin, way too good, especially if you're playing, you know, Subterfuge. Master Assassin is insane. Kingsbane itself here won't really be doing much, so it's kind of pick your poison. In general, I don't really think in a like organized group you need Iron Wire, but if you're pugging, Iron Wire can be really strong. So try and play around with it. You can kind of play with this, for example, or again, you can drop Lightweight Shiv and just kind of slam Shiv on cooldown whenever possible, trying to keep up the uptime and see how that plays for you, whichever way you enjoy. This dropping Lightweight Shiv is technically recommended by the sim, but we're not sims, we're humans. Anyways, I hope that clears up all of the discussions. All of these changes are already in simulations. Make sure you're simming yourself on latest, not on nightly or weekly. Latest will always be the most up-to-date. Dungeon Slice is the way to go for this, and you should see bleed builds catching up in Dungeon Slice, being better in single target. Only downside kind of is in small target cleave. Talking 3 to 4 target cleave. That's kind of when hybrids tends to sort of catch up, but it's equal in AoE, like big AoE, better in single target, better in Dungeon Slice overall. But yeah, play around with it. Let me know what you think. If you have questions, of course, drop them below. I'll try and make sure to get to every single one. And I have a Mythic Plus guide coming out soon that goes over, you know, more dungeon-specific stuff, more overall things to keep track of, and all of the basics for the rotation. So keep an eye out for that, and I will see you guys later. Bye.